right. I am live. Um, and I don't know who's going to be popping in, but hopefully somebody will. And if not, that's fine too. You can just catch it later when it's more convenient for you, if that's what we need to do. Um, so, just real quick, um, Cherie is in court right now. And she's going to come pop in as soon as she's able to get here. And I'm not sure about Alice, but hopefully she'll be popping in um, before long as well. In the meantime, I am solo. Woohoo! I don't know if I've ever been solo before, but this is a first time for everything, right? Um, so tonight we're going to talk about. Hi, Mose. Welcome. I'm so glad somebody's here. um, we're going to talk tonight about um, Elaine Taylor, but I couldn't really uh, talk about Elaine Taylor um, unless and until I give you a little bit of a background of her mentor. And I know you guys have heard me toss her name around a lot of times, but Joyce Gilchrist is who her mentor is. So let me try to give you a little bit of information about Joyce Gilchrist. Um, what I was going to do was, I don't know if I might have X'd it out or turned it off or not turned it off, but um, uh, took it off of the screen out of my share screens. But what I wanted to do first was I wanted to just read to you what uh, Wikipedia has to say about Joyce Gilchrist, a brief biography. And I know that we can't always rely on Wikipedia, but I, yeah, for the most part, as much research and reading as I've done about Joyce Gilchrist, from what I've read so far, I agree. Maybe some dates or some time spans might be off, but I'm going to go ahead and go with Wikipedia for all of you. You can just go to Wikipedia and just type in her name, Joyce Gilchrist, and I'll just start with. First, the brief description. It says Joyce Gilchrist was an American forensic chemist who had participated in more than 3,000 criminal cases in 21 years while working for the Oklahoma City Police Department, and who was accused of falsifying evidence to help prosecutors. Her evidence led in part to 23 people being sentenced to death, 12 of whom have been executed. After her dismissal, Gilchrist alleged that she was fired in retaliation to reporting a sexual misconduct. Um, and that's a whole other topic. So her biography, um, it says Gilchrist earned the nickname Black Magic for her ability to match DNA evidence that other forensic examiners could not. She was also known for being unusually adept at testifying and persuading juries, thus obtaining convictions. In 1994, Gilchrist was promoted to supervisor from forensic chemist after just 9 years on the job, but her colleagues began to raise concerns about her work. Concerns about Gilchrist's actions were first raised when a landscaper, Jeffrey Todd Pierce, who had been convicted of rape in 1986, largely based on Gilchrist's evidence, despite a clean criminal record and good alibi, was exonerated based on additional DNA evidence. Pierce, a husband and the father of two infant children, was misidentified in a police lineup. After voluntarily giving hair and blood samples to the police investigators in an attempt to clear his name, he was arrested and charged with the rape. Gilchrist claimed his hair samples were microscopically consistent with the hairs found at the crime scene. Pierce was cleared of the crime in 2001 after DNA evidence was re-examined and released after 15 years and he was released after 15 years in prison. Pierce subsequently filed a lawsuit against Oklahoma City seeking $75 million and charging that Gilchrist and Bob Macy, a now retired district attorney, conspired to produce false evidence against him. The suit was settled for $4 million in 2007, with one Oklahoma City councilman noting that the city could have had to pay much more and should have paid much more. So that's just a brief biography from Wikipedia about Joyce Gilchrist. I didn't get any links prepared tonight for tonight's show, unfortunately. However, I will, and there's Alice. Hey, Alice.
Hello, can you hear me okay? I'm on my tablet tonight instead of the laptop. It was being a bit funky, so
I can hear you very well, actually, really well. So thank you so much for coming. I didn't get any. I did. I have a sick puppy.
oh
So
dear, what's wrong?
I'm not really sure. I think she's on the mend, but she ended up, there, Mose is here. We have me and you and Mose are here. Yay. And Mose says that he can hear you. So good. But about 4 or 5 days ago, she, threw up a couple of times her whole meal that she had eaten. And I thought she might have just eaten too much because she just like a little piggy. And I thought maybe she had just eaten too much. And so the next couple of days, she was fine. Then she started getting the runs. And then a couple of days ago, she just kind of quit eating and drinking altogether. Um,
Oh,
yeah. So I have been outside with her like every half hour or hour for the last 2 days. I've been taking her outside and making sure that she's, pooping and peeing outside. But let's see, today it got really rough and she pooped in my room a couple of times. She's peed a couple of times. And it's just because she's sick. I mean, she can't help it. Um, but I started giving her some chicken broth, and because she quit drinking and eating altogether, I think I said that. And then yesterday, she slept almost all day yesterday. I had to get her up several times to take her outside and, um, different things that I had to do that I took her with me, and I'd have to wake her up and take her. And I was really nervous yesterday. But today she's had some chicken broth and she's had about maybe a teaspoon or a tablespoon of banana. And she's had several accidents, but she seems to be a little bit better. So she's finally, for the very first time today, she went to sleep about 20 minutes ago. And so all of the great things that I had planned for this episode, I didn't get to really plan and put together the way I wanted to. But I think it'll be okay. I think we'll be able to. Um, I've got some videos from Erica Fuchs that I'm going to share, and uh, a few things that I want to that we can share from my Joyce Gilchrist video that I did. I think it was either earlier this year or late last year. Um, so we'll be okay. And Alice, you know enough about certain things too that you can chime in and comment too and help me out and or just make whatever comments you want to. Um, and then, if people pop in and watch, great. If not, they can hopefully watch it later. um, and I was just saying too, just before you came in, that Cherie's at court right now, and she's going to come in as soon as she's able to, if she gets home from court in time. Um, so I just finished reading. I'm going to start off a little bit about why Joyce Gilchrist um, is important. It's important to know about Joyce Gilchrist to understand Elaine Taylor. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, and I know you agree, and I know that you know quite a bit about Joyce Gilchrist as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Joyce first, and then I've got some short videos from Erica, who did DNA personally, approached the Holtzclaw family after Daniel's case and asked, if she could test, get involved as far as the forensics and things like that. And I'll read a little biography about her too. So that's what I just was kind of starting out with. I just read a little bit about what Wikipedia had to say about Joyce Gilchrist, and it's been in. I didn't look at the date, but that it was last updated about Joyce. But it's been a while since it was last updated, or at least the basic biography, because it speaks about Bob Macy in the present tense. So I'm guessing,
Right, okay.
and he's been dead for quite some time. So, but
Yeah.
that's a reference that people can go and just look at and get an idea. And then, of course, we have all kinds of interesting, little tidbits that we know to add to it. So, um, when so I did, and so Wikipedia actually uh, talked about the Jeffrey Pierce case, which was the case that really kind of broke open the whole thing about Joyce Gilchrist's dirty deeds, if you want to call them that. And so I just we'll talk a little bit about him a little bit more in detail. But what I had found, you can Google Joyce Gilchrist and find lots of information, to anybody who's interested in doing that. There's plenty there. What I wanted to do was kind of quickly read some in the New York Post, or no, rather the New York Times had done several articles from May the 2nd of 2001 to September 2nd of 2001. They did like 6 or 7 articles on her, and you can find them, but because I have not subscribed to the paper, I could only get like, a couple of paragraphs per article that I can share with, everyone. And so I was just going to start with May 2nd, 2001, from the New York Times. Inquiry focuses on scientists employed by prosecutors. Oklahoma City Police forensic chemist Joyce Gilchrist is subject of investigation ordered by Governor Frank Keating after her credibility is bluntly denounced in FBI report finding she misidentified evidence or gave improper courtroom testimony in cases reviewed by the agency. Gilchrist was involved in some 3,000 cases from 1980 to 1993, often helping prosecutors win convictions by identifying suspects with hair, blood, or carpet fibers from crime scenes. Judges, lawyers, and colleagues have criticized her work for years. An immediate probe centers on 23 capital trials, and 10 of those inmates have already been executed. So by the time this article was written, 10 had been executed of the 23. I think now it's 11 or 12. So men were executed. Innocent men were executed based on her junk science, basically. And so let's see. So Attorney General Drew Edmondson at this time said that he would set no more execution dates pending the probe of the investigation on to Gilchrist. And then just 2 days later, from a national briefing, Plains, Oklahoma capital case reexamined. Drew Edmondson, the state attorney general in Oklahoma, says he feels confident that Malcolm Brent Johnson, who was convicted of raping and murdering, not wrongly convicted. the case came under scrutiny as investigators look into questionable work of Oklahoma City police forensic scientist Joyce Gilchrist. Um, and just to before I go further, Malcolm Renton Johnson. Malcolm Renton Johnson was a bad man. He committed lots of crimes, and he was guilty of a lot of crimes, and some horrible crimes too. But this particular crime that he was tried for and convicted and sent to death row for, he was not guilty. He was not guilty of this particular crime. It's believed that it was actually his brother who had committed the rape and the murder in the case. However, he was executed for the crime anyway. And so, Bob Macy's attitude was, well, he might not have, and I don't think he said it about this case particularly. He may have. It's been a while since I've looked at all these cases, but his attitude was, Bob Macy's attitude was, well, even if he didn't, commit that crime, he's guilty of lots of other crimes. So,
yep, or he was there.
He was there, yep. An indicted ejaculator guy, yep. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, well, the only thing the best thing I could say to anybody out there to get a really good idea of the Oklahoma justice system when it comes to Bob Macy and Joyce Gilchrist is read Death and Justice.
Yes.
By Mark Furnham.
Yep. I agree.
And Mark Furnham was for the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And Death and Justice is about the death row in Oklahoma. And he went to the prison and actually spent time speaking to inmates on death row, seeing how it worked, seeing how they done it, and everything like that. And that man has completely changed his narrative on the death penalty. And
yes.
the way he's looked in and delved into the past of Oklahoma and the death penalty and what he's been able to uncover, especially about these two people, is unfriggin' believable.
Yeah.
And it surprises me that they got away with it that much. And what people have to realise, and I know that we're going to come on to this, but what people have to really, really emphasise on is the Elaine and Daniel's case got trained by Joyce Gilchrist.
Yes.
So the things that she got away with, she passed on to her. And then she done it to Daniel, in my opinion. And this is my opinion on what I've picked up and what I've read and what I know about this Gilchrist and that through what we've read in Death and Justice. She passed on her bad habits to Elaine Taylor, and it crucified Daniel. And it should never have happened. So go and read Death and Justice. You can get it on Amazon, and I think now you can actually get it on Audible. So if you've got credits on Audible, you can use one of your credits and download it and listen to it. I mean, I had the pleasure of Rhonda reading me the story, so it was great. When I was in my bed and listening away to it, it was nice and peaceful, nice calm voice. So go to Daniel's Discord and you'll have the lovely Rhonda reading it to you chapter by chapter. We're still not finished yet, but we'll get into that.
Thank you. That's really sweet of you to say. Nobody likes the way we sound on recordings and stuff. So I'm very, but you know what? My voice is what it is. And I was once told that the way when I listen to my voice back and I'm like, oh my God, my voice, people. And I was once told, but Rhonda, that's how we hear you. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
But I think we all do that.
I
You
think
know, the
so.
first time I kind of watched myself back or listened to myself back after being on one of the channels and everything, I'm like, oh my God, is that what I sound like? Jesus, I must get on people's nerves.
I know that's how I feel too, but it is what it is. So hey, Jack. So let me just say, Shaz is here. Hi, Shaz. You weren't really late, Shaz, because I was waiting around for a few minutes to see if anybody would come in, and then I just decided to start. And so you're not really very late. Sherry Lynn Pontillo, welcome. It's nice to see you. And Jack made it. Yay, Jack.
Hi, everyone.
So yeah, we're just barely getting started. No, you don't. We love your voice, Mose. Yeah. So yeah, exactly right. And I'm with Alice, and I know, people hear us say it all the time. We're always talking about death and justice, and we're always talking about Neverly. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome. Gal, still at work. You're just a worker bee. Well, welcome and thanks for tuning in and listening, Neverly. Um, and so we're always talking about death and justice and Bob Macy and Joyce Gilchrist, but it's not because it's because um, it's so compelling and it's so evil and horrible what these guys did to Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County during their what I like to call reign of terror.
Yeah,
Um, because Bob Macy, as I think we've said before, so I won't harp on it, but that was just his goal in life was to you know execute people. And
yeah.
even if
Well,
they
what
weren't
was it?
guilty,
40? Was it 49? 49 or 79
really,
executions or something like that they done in their reign?
yeah, something. It was a lot. It was a lot. Well, and for
And it
Joyce,
didn't matter. It didn't matter if they were innocent, because, as you said earlier, if it came back and it was getting proven that they weren't there and they didn't, but he would come back and say, "Oh well, he must have been in the vicinity."
yes, he had to be
He,
there. He was the
yeah.
lookout then.
If he didn't do it, if he didn't do it, he was the lookout, or he was in the vicinity, or he was near it.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, come on.
And one of the most egregious cases like that fits right into what you're saying is the and I always say the names wrong, so I want to try to get it right. Ronnie, let's see, I have it. Ronnie Lott and Robert Miller. And Robert Miller is the one that Bob Macy and Joyce Gilchrist um, convicted and sent to death row, even after it was proven. And I believe Ronnie Lott even said that he was the one that had raped and murdered the women. Even after Ronnie Lott admitted that, that's exactly, I think, if I'm not mistaken from the book, that's what Bob Macy said. Well, then fine, then but Robert Miller was there and he was probably the lookout or something to that effect. I don't remember
Yep.
exactly what he said, but um, it's just it's convicted at any cost
Yeah,
and
that's exactly how it was. Didn't matter whether they were guilty or not, and even at that, they planted evidence
right. Well,
to get the conviction, So it's Stephen Avery all over again, but
yes,
it's just in a different county in a different state.
yes,
Um, but it's happening to the citizens of that state, and
right,
nobody is giving a flying fuck about it, because it is still happening to this day. And Daniel is a prime example of that corruption.
yep, yes. Well, and with Macy and Gilchrist, they didn't have they weren't able to do DNA yet. It wasn't quite there yet. It was not even really. talked about, and then when it did get talked about during their reign, um, when it did start being done, the DNA, it was, in its infancy, and it was, but the only thing that Joyce Gilchrist was giving them was, and I've asked Dr. Silkman about this, and I know that if any of you have listened to anything that Dr. Silkman has ever said about DNA, or I mean about forensic evidence, um, Gilchrist would use hair, fibers, and stuff like that to which Dr. Silkman has. I don't know if he's used the words junk science, but though hair and fiber hair evidence particularly has been deemed basically junk science. You cannot. People do not have. You can't tell. You can't look at my hairs from my arms or my head or something and compare it to the hairs on Alice's arms or head and know exactly which one of us donated that sample. It's just not possible. Now we know that you can do that with the bulb, or is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Of the, if you pluck a hair from the head that pulls out the bulb and everything, then yes, you can test
Yeah, it's got
that.
to have a follicle. They call it a follicle.
Yeah, the
And
follicle.
it's
Yes.
got, yeah, it's got to have the follicle on the end of it, and it
Right.
is. It's just like a wee bulb root that
Right.
comes straight for the scalp or straight for the source. If it's not got that follicle on the end of it, then you can't test it because
Right.
there's no DNA there.
Right. Yeah. You can't, and that's what Joyce Gilchrist was using, was just the shaft of a hair or arm hair, or any whatever hair she was, and sometimes there weren't even hairs, and that was the case with Ronnie Lee Miller. No, their names are so close, with Ronnie Lott and Robert Miller. Um, she was using hairs that she claimed.
Was it no? Some of the hairs came back as dog hairs or something like that.
I wish I could remember what chapter that is. I had the hardest time reading.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I can't even remember if it was
yeah,
Ronnie's or the other one, but some of the freaking hair was animal hair. And
yeah.
she couldn't distinguish that it was animal hair. And she's supposed to be an expert.
Well, and the thing, I had the hardest time when I was trying to read and record that episode or that chapter, because she's saying in the chapter in the Death and Justice, she's talking about, she's on the witness stand testifying in Robert Miller's, I believe, the one that they sent to death row. Um, she was testifying. Now I can't tell if it. I can tell you if it's dog. How did she say it? I can tell you if it's a dog hair, but I can't tell you what species of dog, and I can't tell you what species of horse, and I can't tell you what species of rat. I was dying.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to see if I can find it because it is just
It's hysterical.
ridiculous what she
Yeah,
came out with. I mean, it's just pathetic. And she's supposed to be a friggin' expert.
yeah, yeah. She's supposed to be. Welcome, William. We're happy to have you here. Yeah, she is a supposedly. Now, the more you learn about Joyce Gilchrist, the more that you will learn. If you do some research on your own, you will learn that she really wasn't even qualified to be a lab analyst, much less a supervisor of a crime lab. So it's just outrageous, about the way that she conduct. And not only that, but Joyce Gilchrist believed that no one in the field of forensic evidence was as good as her. Nobody knew as much as she did, and she was dogged at it. She would not, um, you know, submit that anybody might know something else more than her, because she just had her ego. I'm surprised she could even get into to a courtroom because her ego was so big. So I was going to play some of the video that we did, but I don't know if I can figure out what it was. This was just over a year ago that we did the Joyce Gilchrist and Elaine Taylor video. But I will play a little bit of it for you if that's okay. And I don't even know where I'm going to stop, but because I don't really remember, and because of my puppy, this last couple of days, I haven't been able to haven't really been able to put as much into making sure I was getting the right things or not. And for those of you who came in late, it's not because I'm having normal puppy issues, but she's been sick the last couple of days. So, so I've been spending all of my time taking care of a sick puppy and not being able to really get much done. But let me see if I can, I will share part of it and I'll figure out where I want to stop when I'm in the middle of when I decided. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. And I've learned that playing YouTube videos, at least my own, is not very good with the sound, so I'll do the best I can here. Okay. All the sound is up. Okay. So this is about 30, almost 40 minutes into this episode that we did, and it was on November 1st, 2020, if you want to go back and listen to the whole thing. Trying to get his life back in order, and he ended up, he worked in construction of some type, and when he ended up in a freak accident where a piece of machinery had kind of swung, I think, through the air and hit him in the head. And he ultimately ended up dying. And when I read his story, it almost made me cry. I just thought, my God, how can you just, you just spend most of your life in prison for something you didn't do. And then you get out of prison and then you die, That was Joe White that I was speaking of there. And he was one that had been sent to prison, to death row, by Gilchrist, and then found to be innocent later. So I'm not really, see if I can get past it a little bit here. Oops. Say that they had somebody in prison and put them on death row. It's just sickening. So Gilchrist testified in 23 death penalty cases, and 12 of those defendants have been executed. I hate her freaking guts. Hate her guts.
I get it.
What's that, Kay?
I get it.
Oh, yeah. Kay, do you want to read one of these, or Cherie, or somebody, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Cherie.
Okay. Elaine, this is number 11 of the 95 facts we've been covered, and that's what this whole presentation is centered around. Elaine Taylor previously admitted to destroying rape kit evidence under orders from her former supervisor, the late OCPD chemist Joyce Black Magic Gilchrist, whose serial fabrications and scientific misconduct led to multiple wrongful convictions and disgraced the police department, city, and state. And this fact wasn't disclosed at Daniel's trial. So now we're going to learn about Elaine.
Now we're going to talk about Elaine. She's okay. We'll wait to get into Elaine.
Well, Gilchrist 2.0, as I like to call her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Alice calls her Gilchrist 2.0. What do you mean reverb effects, Jack? What is wrong? Nothing? Anything? Oh, well, it's me. It's got to have a sound problem, of course. So we'll get into her, here in a minute. I just wanted to give a little more information though about Gilchrist. I mean, there's really no more to give. Ultimately, though, if you want to go back and learn a little bit more about Gilchrist, or go and listen to Death and Justice in my Discord, that would actually be the very best thing to do. The best information is in that book, and so that would be my recommendation. Like Alice said, there's just the information that is given in there is amazing. So that was what I kind of wanted to just give a background. And the reason I wanted to, let's see, I had some okay, there were some more articles from the New York Times, but we'll go past those. But I wanted to read to you page 109, because Elaine Taylor is mentioned in Death and Justice. So on page 109 of the book, it says, quote, Gilchrist's whole supervisory techniques seem to be based only on emotions, vengeance, vendettas, said chemist Elaine Taylor. You never knew what to expect from her. So the only choice, if you wanted to stay in this career field, was to keep your mouth shut and do what she told you. It was like walking around on eggshells all the time. And that was the second thing that I found for her. Hi, Dr. Silkman, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. We're talking about forensic evidence, so perfect. Is Gilchrist related to Culhane? God, I know they're both just as evil, just as
Anything's possible. Anything's possible.
We'll do their DNA and see. But yeah, so it's that was I think the second. And what is so disturbing about that is, I like to believe that I would not compromise my own respect, self-respect, and my integrity in that way, to just say, well, if you wanted to stay in your career field, and then you had to just do whatever she said. Well, whenever doing whatever she told you to do was breaking the law and costing people their freedom and their lives, how can you just shut your mouth and just let it and just do what you're told? But that's what Elaine Taylor chose to do.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's one of the biggest problems that even here in the UK, you know what I mean? I think that's one of the biggest problems in the system, is the fact that if there's a young recruit or lawyer, or, I mean, rookie, because whether it's a cop, a judge, they're a rookie, you know what I mean? Because they're still learning and stuff like that. Maybe not necessarily a judge, but the problem is they're getting trained by people who have been doing this stuff for years and years and years and have got away with it. And they're coming in and coming up in it. And they know that the way that they're being shown how to do it, or it's, oh, well, you're supposed to do it this way. But, it doesn't really matter if you do it this way.
Yeah.
Then they feel that they want to say something, but they can't, because if they do, everybody else in the lab or in the police station or in the DA's office or whatever it may be, won't talk to them, call them a traitor, call them a backstabber, and things like that. And it shouldn't be like that. Yeah, exactly. They're learning the bad habits, but they haven't got a route that they can take to complain about these bad habits without it affecting their personal life, or their coming up the ladder or whatever. And it shouldn't be like that. There should be an avenue for them to take, because I know I've seen and this is an outsider looking in, I've seen people who whistleblow in America, a lot more people turn on them
Yeah.
for doing that, you know. I mean, I know, and here in the UK, a lot of people do turn on the whistleblowers and stuff like that. But see if it's something important like corruption or mistreating the animals or something like that, and they're wearing a hidden camera and they're being a whistleblower, then they get a lot of backing here.
Yeah.
But I've noticed it's completely different in the US, and that's maybe one of the problems. Well, I think that's one of the big problems. You know, a lot of people say to us, what would you like to be changed, and things like that, you know, and we all say, oh, the immunity's got to go, you know. And I think that's another thing that could maybe be built on, is having a separate independent unit for these people to be able to come and do these complaints. Because if no, they're just going to be mere Joyce Gilchrist training Elaine Taylors, and then Elaine Taylor's training the next young buck to come up, you know, and it's just going to be a vicious circle.
Yeah. Well, and it makes it acceptable. If Joyce Gilchrist got away with it, well, she didn't get away with it. I mean, she did for many, many, many years, and 12 men were executed because of her. So she did get away with it, but ultimately, you know, the law did catch up with her, and she was terminated. And, you know, again, you know, for all of that information, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to this episode on the 1st of November of last year, because there's a lot more information in there. And what, Alice, about the book? Listen to or read the book, because it's amazing how much you'll learn from it about Joyce Gilchrist and Bob Macy.
If you read that book, as I said, I'm sure you can get it on. You can definitely get it on Amazon. But I think now they've actually done it in Audible form. So if you've got Audible, use a credit to get the book in Audible, and read that book, because you read that book, you will get a better idea of Elaine Taylor and exactly what she's done with Daniel's case.
Right.
Because she doesn't know any better, because it's who she's been trained from.
Right. And I agree with that 100%, Alice. However, I think that you also, to be able to just turn your head and say, well, that's what I was told to do, so I just did it. I think that also, that has to be in your makeup, in your own personal code of ethics, to be able to do that too. Because, you know, I think it was Shaz that said that she said I couldn't do that. I don't think I could either. What I know about myself right now, who I am, and, you know, what I stand for, and what I expect, and what I expect of myself, I don't think I could either. And you know, I just say I don't think, because we never know what, you know, I never know, but you don't know what you're going to face in life that may make you be somebody or do something that you never thought you would do. So
I mean, that's like Corinne, Luke's mum. She did an interview, and one of the reporters asked her, what would you have done if Luke did this? And her reply was, I can't answer that, because I'm not in that situation. So I don't know how I would react, or how I can answer that, because I'm not in that situation. And a lot of people say, oh, well, that was her just deflecting. But it's not, because she's not in that situation, you know. Her son's not a murderer, so she can't say she would, you know, take away this or cover him or send him away or whatever, because she's never been in that situation. But a lot of people think that that's no giving an answer. You know, I would give that answer, because you don't know what you would do you don't really know what you would do in a situation like that until you're actually in that situation, in my opinion, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. I agree. So yeah. So we don't know what we're. Oh, Cherie is somewhere. She might be listening. I don't know if she's actually gonna be able to pop in right now or not. Let's see. Have you popped in, Cherie? No, that's okay. Um, uh, let's see. What was the? Oh, so page number. I get so easily distracted. It's ridiculous. Page number 113 of the book. This is from Elaine Taylor. The rape kits, as a rule of thumb, were destroyed after 2 years, and Joyce stated to us that it was by direction of Mr. Macy. Elaine Taylor told Boschel, who was investigating Gilchrist at this point. She said, I never saw anything in writing. She was my immediate supervisor, so I believe, again, here she goes. So I believe the only thing I could do was to follow her orders or else pay the consequences. Taylor said that Gilchrist told her she had a blanket okay from Mr. Macy to destroy the rape evidence. Now, the point of this is that the rape kit evidence was supposed to have been kept for 7 years in any case, and so a minimum of 7 years. But apparently, Joyce Gilchrist decided, for unknown reasons, that the rape kit evidence, they were going to destroy them after 2 years. And so that was her just making up her own, and then she threw Bob Macy under the bus, which who cares?
Yeah.
She throws him under the bus and says, oh well, Prosecutor Macy told me that we could do that we could destroy him after 2 years, and I had a blanket okay to do that. Which, yeah, who knows? Maybe he did say that because he's just as evil as she is. But, she definitely threw him under the bus and said, well, it was him that said we could do it. So, and I don't have to ask every 2 years or every time. We can just do it. So, but again, there was Elaine Taylor, had to do it or else I was going to pay the consequences. Okay. All right. Well, and then the last one I'll share with you from the book regarding Elaine Taylor was on page 114. It kind of went into kind of stayed with the topic. She said at one point, chemists Melissa Keith and Kayla Marshall decided that they would no longer destroy rape evidence despite Gilchrist's orders. Oh, well, there's a novel idea in this Elaine Taylor, right? So these two other analysts in the lab, they repackaged the rape kit evidence, and they stored it elsewhere where Gilchrist wouldn't discover it. And she said, and then they did this on their own and didn't tell Gilchrist what they had done. Both of them were concerned that rape evidence was being destroyed in cases that were still open or pending. Now, those two analysts, they did what I think I would do. And they, despite what Gilchrist told them, they saved it, they repackaged it, and they kept it elsewhere. Now, it's important to note that Elaine Taylor did not take place in the repackaging and storing of the rape evidence, which was effectively going against the direction of Joyce Gilchrist. So I really don't know how much I can, believe that, Gilchrist thought, well, I had to do it. It just sounds so weak to me, like such a weak person to not be able to,
yeah, it's a weak excuse.
Yeah,
it's a weak excuse. It's like if you went out and robbed a bank and says, oh, my boss helped me to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
At some point, you've got to be responsible for your own actions, and she's not. Let's go ahead and just play this and see where else it goes. I won't spend a
kind
lot
of
of
evil
time.
and horrible and ugly, but she's not quite as interesting as Gilchrist. Gilchrist has a lot of years of evilness that she shared. So, I love this. Look what Cherie's done. She has named from Black Magic Gilchrist to Twisted Taylor. I love it. I love Twisted Taylor. I think it's amazing. Taylor began working for Oklahoma City Police Department in 1989 in the equine testing lab. She moved to the serology DNA lab by 1991, and by 1994, Gilchrist was in charge of that lab and the people in it, like Elaine Taylor.
Can I interrupt?
Please do.
I'm trying to think why we need an equine testing lab.
I don't know.
Where in the world? I
I
mean,
don't know. I don't know. I've always, every time I read that, I think, did I read that wrong?
In the police department.
Yeah. What?
okay.
Anybody out there in the chat know why that would be necessary for us to have? Or for anybody for Oklahoma to have?
I mean, I know there's horse country here, but it's not necessarily in Oklahoma County.
Well, I still don't.
Anyway, I'm sorry. That's like
No.
a rural move right there.
I know. I wondered the same thing, and I just thought, well, maybe I just don't know, and maybe I just not need to ask, because maybe I sound kind of silly, but no, I wondered the same thing. I don't. It makes no sense to me. But you know, a lot of these cases don't make sense to me. So now I'm really pissed off when every time I read this kind of thing that Elaine Taylor says that the only reason that she was destroying rape kits and destroying evidence and lying about evidence and all the things that she did is because Joyce Gilchrist told her to, and she had to do it to keep her job safe. Again, at some point, we are all adults and we are all responsible for our own actions. And I like to believe that I would never compromise myself in that way. I would rather just not have a career. I hope, because I can't imagine what it takes for a person to be willing to compromise themselves in this way. But they did. So she did what Gilchrist told her to do, including destruction of evidence, until Gilchrist's termination in September of 2001. It says until here, but we all know that it wasn't just until, because Elaine Taylor carried on the legacy for Elaine Taylor, or for Joyce Gilchrist. All right, read it, Cherie.
Twisted Taylor plays hide the evidence. Rayshawn Mullins petitioned the state of Oklahoma 3 times for post-conviction testing of DNA evidence used against him in 2009. 3 times he was denied. Why? Dozens and dozens of crucial forensic items in Mullins' case.
Just really quick before it goes on, Rayshawn Mullins is the one that I think it was last week when we were talking about Kim Davis. Rayshawn Mullins is the one is one of Kim Davis's cases. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Case had been destroyed or lost.
All right, I'm going to try to see if I can pull up the picture of Rayshawn Mullins. I just barely got that. Excuse me.
Right,
I just barely got the picture of Rayshawn just before we went live. So,
hey, while you're looking for that, I think an interesting thing is looking at key players in this, and the judge who is a reoccurring player is Judge Cindy. I think you pronounce it Trong. It's Truong. She's the one who set the $5 million cash bond for Daniel. And her name is also on some of the shady deals that happened with the accusers during the trial or since the trial even. So, I mean, definitely Judge Cindy Trong's name needs to be on the radar.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I saved that picture, but I don't know why I can't show it. But anyway, did you share that in Discord, Cherie? Oh wait, there it is.
I put it in Discord.
Oh, you put it in Discord, okay. Maybe I can do it this way. Let's see. It was a pretty big deal to me. I wanted everybody's pictures, but I couldn't find everybody. But yeah, I don't know why it's not opening. Oh well. It doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal. But anyway,
Long, like how long they are allowed to destroy it is if the criminal defendant is notified in advance and given 90 days to object.
okay.
So sorry about that. So I'm going to stop playing this at this point. I'll let you guys. I think it's interesting, and I would like for you to go back and listen to it. But basically, this was a Oklahoma retention of biological evidence statute. It stated from 2014. It stated that criminal justice agencies must retain and preserve biological evidence for as long as a person convicted of a violent felony offense is incarcerated, with the exception of destruction of biological evidence is allowed if a criminal defendant is notified in advance and given 90 days to object. And we know that, it's the same with Stephen and Brendan's case, which is why there was so much, or is so much controversy from the bones being given to the Hawbox.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
Yeah. William. I don't think Gilchrist had kids, but Elaine Taylor, Rocky Gregory, who was investigating Daniel, who's in the Michelle Malkin Daniel in the Den interview, and that is Elaine Taylor's son. So just to put that out there for you. So that's who her son is, and she done the testing on Daniel's evidence. So read of that what you will. And that's one of the big problems that I have got with this bloody case, is the fact that the investigating officer's mother is the one that done the DNA testing and everything like that. But not only that, the investigating officer also shoved his horn in an evidence bag without gloves and anything like that, and could have had touch DNA on him that's went onto Daniel's trousers, and then it's been sent to the lab to his mother, and she's coming up with all sorts. So, yeah, that's a real big problem in my eyes.
I just really quick, I want to just make it was she's his mother-in-law.
All right. Sorry.
Elaine Taylor, but still, and the thing is too that there's all kinds of question about, well, what kinds of conversations were they having at Sunday dinner?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so because
I mean, for being the mother-in-law, it's not even that, being the mother-in-law. If he's went home and he's talked to his wife, and then his wife's gone to see her mother for afternoon tea, what are they sitting talking about?
Right.
How many times did Daniel come up at their dinner table or their Sunday afternoon tea or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is a major, major conflict of interest. He should have been removed from the case, or she shouldn't have been able to test the DNA.
Exactly. And there, because I know at trial, I believe it was at trial, well, probably, Yeah, at trial and maybe depositions. I'm not 100% certain, but for sure at the trial they talked about, Rocky Gregory being related to Elaine Taylor, and did did had Rocky made the state, the DA's office, aware that he was related to Elaine Taylor by marriage, and he said, well, or you said, well, we're all aware. Basically, the idea was, but what's the big deal? It doesn't matter, kind of thing, and it does matter. It's
It
like
does, yeah.
it's like William says, that nepotism all over it, for sure, for sure. And Elaine Taylor wants to make sure that her son-in-law is getting what he wants, because he's married to my daughter, so I got to make sure that and although
Yeah.
now he's not, because now he's filed for divorce, but at the
I mean,
time,
in my opinion, I think that this is what maybe this secret grand jury was about, because Daniel's defense team was not allowed in that
yeah,
secret grand jury, which they should have been, and they should have been informed about it, and it was all done in secret. What was said in that grand jury, and who was it about? Was it about the relationship between Gilchrist and that? And they're like, oh, we better not tell the defense that.
yeah, yeah, we don't really know. We're not really sure exactly everything that was said in the oh, you
But
don't
see,
have the link.
Daniel's defense now should be entitled to access to the transcripts or whatever happened in that grand jury, because they should have been in there in the first place. And it's ridiculous that they weren't there to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm asking Cherie if she's going to join us, and she's like, well, I don't have the link, so I just gave you the link, Cherie, so now you can jump in. Yeah, exactly. Um so I won't play any more of that. I suggest that you guys go ahead and um, check it out on your own in your own time. Just listen to it if you want. And just to clarify something, in case anybody was wondering, um, I had just discovered. I think it was in that particular video, in the slide presentation. I had just discovered the little red laser pointer. So I
Yeah.
was I was having a little fun with it, and then I was going to stop doing it, but then T1 was in the chat going. He was like, "No, don't stop." So okay, he was having too much
That's
fun
right,
with it,
yeah.
so I just played with it. But so yeah, that's probably a little obnoxious and annoying, but it's okay. Try to just listen and not watch; it won't be as bad. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to let I'm going to let Erica Fuchs tell you guys in some short videos that she has done for Daniel's case, talking about the DNA and everything in Daniel's case. She can wrap it up much, much better and more, uh, you know, intelligently than I can, for sure. So there's Cherie. Hello, Cherie. Oh, she left. So first thing I'm going to do is read to you just a little bit about who Erica is, so you understand her importance in this. Erica Fuchs is a biologist from Iowa who became involved in the effort to free Daniel Holtzclaw when she noticed and raised awareness of the state's forensic science errors at the heart of the conviction. Erica earned her bachelor's degree in biology from Harvard University and her MS from Iowa State University. Let me get over here and let Cherie back in. Oh, she's not connected. um, from Iowa State University. Um, she has performed DNA cloning, sequencing, and genetic engineering in university research labs. She also volunteered and worked as a victims advocate for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. Erica is now a board member of the nonprofit Uncuff the Innocent. The nonprofit was incorporated in 2017 by Erica and 4 former police officers. 2 of the board members are exonerees who spent more than 20 years wrongfully incarcerated. The nonprofit is currently financially aiding Daniel Holtzclaw, Michael Oxley, Timothy Wright Jr., and J.B. Van Story. And you can find all of their cases in Uncuff the Innocent. And you can also find the Uncuff the Innocent page at Coze. I'm going to mess it up. Coze. The website that Julie created. I'll have to. I feel really embarrassed, but I can't think of what it's called right now. Coze. Did you know, Alice? I don't remember. Anyway, I'll give you guys the link in a few minutes here. But what I'm going to do is just play these short videos of Erica's, and she will break it down much better than I can. So let's see here. Oh, hang on. Give me 1 second, Sheree. Okay.
The OCPD DNA lab has a troubled history because one of the worst forensic analysts in the world worked there, Joyce Gilchrist, and led to many people being wrongfully convicted, even ending up on death row. My concern is that if we don't pay attention to history, we will repeat what has happened. And I think that has occurred in Daniel Holtzclaw's case, because once again, we've seen some members of the government wanting to pretend that there were no errors and not allow the public to understand that a forensic analyst was incorrect. I would hope that the Attorney General and the district attorneys would look back at what happened with Joyce Gilchrist and realize more important than getting convictions is making sure that forensic science is presenting the truth, as much of it as you can know. And then that would really help in cases to make sure that defendants get fair trials. In Daniel's case, the errors were substantial enough that the 6 internationally renowned forensic scientists who went public with their report concluded that Daniel did not receive a fair trial and his convictions should be overturned so that he can have a new trial free from forensic science errors. And I agree with their conclusion wholeheartedly.
Okay.
I mean, that's it. You've got experts like that coming forward. You know what I mean? The same way, and Stephen in that, in Brendan's case especially, he's got 250. But there is experts in their field that are coming forward and saying this is a shambolic conviction and it needs to be looked at. And they're just not paying attention.
Well, and yes, they're not paying attention, but they're not trying to pay attention either. They have no desire whatsoever to to find the truth about Daniel's case. So
No, or anything. They don't want to admit that they actually got it wrong, and that's the problem. You know, I mean, all growing up and everything like that, I was always told it takes a bigger man to admit when they're wrong. You know what I mean? So if you're wrong about something, say that you're wrong about it. You know, if you get it wrong. So if I do get anything wrong and it's pointed out to me, look, that's wrong. This is what's happened, or this is what's said. You know what I mean? And I'm like, right, okay, sorry, I got it wrong. That was my fault. You know what I mean? But when it comes to police forces and judges and lawyers and things like that, it's a completely different story, because they don't want to admit that they get it wrong, because If they get one wrong, it's going to look at other cases, you know what I mean? And how many other cases have they got wrong?
Right.
And that's not what they're prepared to handle.
Right. And that's exactly what happened with Joyce Gilchrist. So,
Yeah.
Okay, here's the second one with Erica.
There were several articles that show that Mr. Giger's belief that DNA transfer does not happen, that belief is incorrect and does not match science. There's a study by Sarah Jones and Kirsty Scott that came out in 2010 in the journal Science and Justice. And this study discovered that a woman's non-intimate skin cell DNA from her face and hands could transfer to a man's hands when he touched them briefly, and then to the underwear of the man, and even all the way to his genitals. So that proves that Mr. Giger's statement is incorrect when he was claiming that this explanation of innocent DNA transfer via Daniel's hands is impossible. A second study by Helmus and others, which was published online October 27 of 2015, which is just before the trial, found that you could actually have skin cell DNA transfer from a person's neck, rubbed for 5 seconds with a piece of cloth, and then the cloth was handed to a second person. It then got under the person's hands, and then that second person touched a second piece of cloth, and that second piece of cloth then found the initial person's from the neck DNA on that second piece of cloth. So this is called tertiary transfer, and that could match what happened in Daniel's case, where he was said to have touched possessions, a bag belonging to this teenage accuser, and then would have had to urinate during his 10-hour shift, I believe it was. And in fact, I think he's probably often having to go to the restroom, and police officers don't necessarily stop at a store to use the restroom. They may have to go by the side of the road when you're not even having, when you have to stop people quickly and go on chases. You're not going to necessarily have time to go to a restroom. So he would have to unzip the fly of his pants and urinate very quickly right there, which would give ample opportunity for his hands to touch the fly of his pants while urinating. A third study is by Kale and others, and that was published online September 2015, also before the trial. And this study found that if you shake hands with a second individual and then touch a knife and then swab the knife to see the DNA that you find, you can actually find DNA belonging to the person whose hands you shook, but not your own hands when you handled the knife. So as an analogy to what could have happened in Daniel's case, on the fly of his pants, he could have transferred DNA from another person with whom he came in contact, but on the fly of his pants, he may not have left sufficient quantities of his own DNA for it to be identified during testing.
Okay. There's just 2 more, I think. They're not very long.
On February 5th, 2016, which was after Daniel's conviction, Prosecutor Giger talked with Ariel Reshef of Coco 5 News, and he said a statement that I'd like to break down to address all the factual errors in it and also point out what is true. The overall issue here is that Prosecutor Giger has misrepresented the DNA evidence in Daniel's case, and I'm concerned that a prosecutor who has done that is also the one who, in recent secret hearings, has been questioning the people at the hearings about Elaine Taylor's personnel records. I don't believe that someone who has misrepresented the DNA evidence, not only in the trial and to the public, is able to understand the evidence enough to realize whether there are errors in it or not, because his statements to me are internally inconsistent and irrational. So to the public on February 5th, 2016, in a TV news report, he said this.
The DNA evidence were skin cells. The skin cells were transferred through the body fluids of a 17-year-old girl after he raped her. That's what the evidence was. That's what the jury heard. And certainly that's what they convicted him of.
Some people say they're skin cells. They could have been from anywhere.
They tried to explain DNA from a 17-year-old girl that ends up inside his pants. Quite explanation was not believable because you can't explain that.
So those are Mr. Gigger's understanding of the evidence and the trial. And the part that he is correct about is that the jury did hear that the evidence was that there was vaginal fluid, because that's what Mr. Gigger told them in the closing argument when he misrepresented the evidence. We've already heard the statement that Elaine Taylor made during the trial, which was that scientifically she cannot tell how the DNA transferred to the fly of the pants. So Mr. Gigger should have known that evidence does not allow him to make the statement to the public that there is vaginal fluid. And I would like to ask him what made him make that statement when it's not consistent with the evidence his own DNA analyst presented. He also said that the jury convicted Daniel because of this evidence that there supposedly was vaginal fluid. And that part I would agree with Mr. Gigger, because DNA evidence and forensic evidence in a jury trial is so important to jurors that any kind of misrepresentation of it will have a high impact on their decisions for the verdict. There have been studies that have looked at this issue. There's a report by 6 internationally known scientists that was published because of their concerns about how scientific issues and flaws in the science, in Daniel's case, impacted the verdict. And they did research, reported on research that shows that jurors often overvalue the weight of DNA evidence, even when it lacks probative value, meaning the weight of the evidence, how important it is to deciding whether a crime occurred. And this is especially true in circumstantial cases, which would be cases where you don't have, say, a video of the crime happening. You just have little bits of evidence that don't directly prove there was a crime. And any kind of misrepresentation of DNA evidence is going to make the jurors feel that a crime occurred, especially when they're told something like there's vaginal fluid when there wasn't. Back to the statement that Prosecutor Gigger made, he said the cells were transferred through the body fluids of a 17-year-old girl. That is false. Like we talked about, there was no evidence of body fluid. So you can't say definitively that there was body fluid there. If you don't test for something, you can't say that it's there. But they didn't see anything that suggested vaginal fluid, no white stains, nothing that would make them think it was there. So it was completely speculation on his part that vaginal fluid was present. Another part of his statement, which I take exception to, and the 6 internationally known scientists, they all felt that the evidence showed there was a valid non-sexual explanation for the DNA found on the fly of Daniel's pants. And that explanation is non-intimate DNA transfer. So this is the sort of transfer that Mr. Gigger is telling the public is simply not possible. He said it's not a reasonable argument to claim that DNA could transfer from a teenager to her purse, for example, to Daniel's hands and to the fly of the pants. But these 6 internationally renowned scientists have looked at the evidence, and they know about the studies that show that DNA transfers very readily from our hands to objects we can touch. But it's not always consistently transferring. So sometimes you may touch an object and you don't leave DNA, but sometimes you may.
Okay. Let's see. Thank you for your comments, Dr. Silkman. I'm really glad that you're here to make comments and help us know help us understand some of these things.
I was just talking about this issue of whether Daniel's DNA could be found on the fly of his pants, because we talked about how in all 4 samples of DNA from the fly of the pants, there's actually male DNA of unknown origin. We don't know for sure the male or males from whom that came. Prosecutor Giger has made a statement on December 13th, 2016, in a Channel 4K4 news clip that shows once again he does not understand the evidence.
If what they are trying to get people to believe, which is not accurate, is that it could transfer from a purse to hands to pants to inside of pants. Significantly, Daniel Holtzclaw's own DNA was not found on the inside of his uniform pants. I think that speaks probably louder than anything I could argue as to the ability of someone's skin cells from their hands to get transferred to a piece of fabric.
We talked about articles that show, in fact, DNA can transfer from a person's hands to objects. This has been known for over 20 years. So that part's an error. But the other part that's an error is when Mr. Giger claims that Daniel's DNA was not found on the fly of the pants. He got this claim from his DNA analyst, Elaine Taylor, who testified in the trial that Daniel was excluded from contributing DNA to all 4 samples of the fly of the pants. And Prosecutor Giger's argument then in the trial was that if you can't find Daniel's DNA, then surely that would mean he didn't touch the fly of the pants with his hands, and therefore DNA matching a teenager on the fly couldn't have come from Daniel's hands, otherwise we would have found Daniel's DNA. That argument is flawed, and it breaks down for several reasons. Number one, Elaine Taylor was incorrect when she argued that you could exclude Daniel from being a contributor to the fly of the pants. Most obviously, in the 2 interior samples where there was a Y chromosome that she failed to disclose during the trial or in her written report about her findings, that Y chromosome with a low level of it present could have come from Daniel, but they did no testing of the Y chromosome to see if its alleles matched what you'd expect from Daniel. So it was simply wrong to conclude that there was no DNA from Daniel because they could not tell that. The results were actually inconclusive. For the 2 outer samples from the fly of the pants, those were mixtures of at least three or more people. When you have complex DNA mixtures, that would be mixtures from at least 3 people, it is not possible to conclusively say that a person is excluded from contributing, because actually many alleles that match Daniel's DNA profile were found in those 2 samples, just not all of his alleles. And so we don't know, was it that his DNA was not there at all, or was his DNA there at low levels so that only some of the alleles that matched Daniel were detected? The conclusion should be that it's inconclusive as to who contributed to those samples and whether he could be excluded or not. In Elaine Taylor's written reports, for 3 of the samples, the second one, which was partially inside, and then the 3rd and 4th from the inside, she correctly wrote in her report that the data were inconclusive as to whether the contributors who contributed very little DNA were a particular person or not. So she was correct for those samples in saying it was inconclusive as to who those minor contributors could be. But for the exterior sample, which was a mixture of many people's DNA at approximately equivalent levels, during her written report, she actually stated that Daniel Holtzclaw could be excluded. And I feel that was an error from what I've read about forensic analysis of DNA mixtures. When you have a mixture where there are many alleles present from a variety of people at approximately equal level, you just can't tell whom they came from, especially when there are some lower level alleles, not at high levels, where it's possible that not all of the person's alleles were detected. So she made this error in her written report, but then especially in the trial, she contradicted her written report statement that there were inconclusive results, when in the trial she claimed that Daniel was excluded as a contributor. Mr. Giger, however, latched on to her argument that there was no DNA from Daniel, and then he like he said to the press in December of 2016, used this claim that Daniel's DNA was not present to argue against the possibility that Daniel just innocently transferred DNA from the teenager and others on the fly to the fly of the pants through his hands. A final error that Mr. Giger made is revealed in a December 2016 statement he made to the press, to K4 News. And he was talking about his belief that vaginal fluid was found, and yet simultaneously he believed that there was no test for vaginal fluid. So he said a very peculiar, internally inconsistent statement.
Fluid containing the skin cells is absorbed into the pants, and that's what we have. If Mr. Holtzclaw or his supporters are advocating that there is a test that determines that this is vaginal fluid, they are lying. There is no test that does that.
So this is incorrect for several reasons. Like we said, there was no testing done to see if there was vaginal fluid. However, in fact, there is a presumptive test for vaginal fluid. There's at least one lab in the US that can do a presumptive test. A presumptive test means if you get a positive result, it could come from vaginal fluid, but there are other stains or liquids that could give that positive result also. However, it is a test that can be done. And alternate light sources are useful for even detecting if there's any kind of staining at all that's not visible to the naked eye, and that was not done. So that could have been done too, to try to see if there was any kind of fluid. So this statement is very odd because on the one hand, Mr. Giger's giving his speculative claim that there was fluid that absorbed into the fly of the pants, presumably vaginal fluid, because he's arguing in favor of there having been a rape. But then he acknowledges there's no test for vaginal fluid. So how can you claim you have vaginal fluid when there was no way to test for it? That makes no logical sense. It's completely unscientific. So this is an example of why I would worry about Mr. Giger for the state of Oklahoma being the one to have any kind of legitimate ability to question scientists about what the evidence was and whether the DNA evidence was significant, because I don't believe he understood it.
So, she's talking about, Erica's talking a lot about, Galen Giger and the stuff that he said at trial and whatnot. And we're supposed to be talking about Elaine Taylor. The point is that he got all of this information from Elaine Taylor, and Elaine Taylor clearly lied at trial about the fact that Daniel's DNA wasn't even found. Well, they didn't know if his DNA was found. Well, if his DNA was present, because there wasn't the results were inconclusive, because what really happened was that Daniel, well, there was DNA from the accuser, and of course, and then there was DNA from another one or two. Cherie or Alice, correct me if I'm, for whatever reason it's slipping my mind, but there was also DNA, inconclusive DNA from at least one or two other males that they couldn't identify. And we know that Daniel, at the time that he stopped the teenage accuser whose DNA was found, there were three people in that party that he stopped. There was the teenager, and then there was a friend of hers, a female friend of hers. Her street name was Face. No, her street name was Chocolate. And then there was a male person in that party who his street name was Face. And so there's no way of knowing if Daniel's or Face's DNA was on the fly of Daniel's pants. And also, let's not forget that Rocky Gregory stuck his bare hand into the evidence bag before he had Daniel put his uniform, pants, and belt into the bag, into the evidence bag.
I was just going to say that, Rhonda. I was just going to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
He shoved his hand and into the bag, and it came up to his elbow.
Yeah.
And twisted his hand round the bag, and then gave it a shook. Then got Daniel's trousers and rolled them up and put them into the bag.
Yeah.
That's how transfer could have got on there. It could be Rocco Gregory's DNA that was found on the frigging pants and all. And that could have been in part of the secret hearing. That secret hearing that they had, I'm positive, is to do with Gilchrist and her DNA testing, and maybe even being his mother-in-law.
You don't mean Gilchrist, you mean Elaine Taylor?
Yeah, Taylor, sorry, yeah.
I know, they're one and the same to us, though, at times, aren't they?
Yeah, I should have said Gilchrist 2.0.
Yeah. Okay, this is the last short little video with Erica Fuchs that she concluded with.
My hope has always been that Mr. Campbell wrote it because of his science background, even though he's working for the police, that as a scientist he would critique and criticize the forensic analysis and courtroom testimony of his analyst, Ms. Taylor, because we all can make mistakes, but what's important is when we recognize them, that we try to recognize them and then correct them and make sure that they never happen again, because Daniel Holtzclaw did not get a fair trial. And if these errors in the forensic analysis for his case occurred, it is possible that they occurred in other cases as well. So this doesn't just affect Daniel. It affects anyone in Oklahoma who ends up being accused of crime. Campbell replied to my questions about DNA transfer and whether when you find DNA on some evidence item, you can use it to conclude that a crime had occurred or that it meant anything more than maybe just people had shaken hands and then touched something. He said, "You have absolutely stumbled across the major point with contact or trace DNA in that it is by no means absolute. There are many, many reasons why your DNA could be serendipitously present or not." He wrote, "You can get DNA from a few cells. You can get DNA from a few cells. Great. That means we can solve anything. No way. What DNA practitioners often overlook in the zeal to apply what they do is that we don't know anywhere near as much about it as we think we do. For example, the key is always, can you produce data or studies to support this hypothesis? That's Science 101. But with trace DNA, we really know very little about how trace DNA acts. There are so many variables involved that it makes interpretation of the circumstances very complex. In forensics in general, I think this is often forgotten in the rush to connect the dots." This quote really relates to Elaine Taylor's incorrect statements. She was advocating for the presence of vaginal fluid or saliva without doing any tests for them. She was concluding based on DNA that the likelihood of there being fluid was more likely than just a non-intimate touch. And she also ended up, based on the DNA samples, concluding incorrectly that you could exclude Daniel as a contributor when the data were actually inconclusive. Then Mr. Giger ended up taking the incorrect DNA analysis and rushing to connect the dots from those results to his belief that Daniel was guilty. He created an argument that did not make scientific sense.
Excuse me. Okay, so basically what Erica's telling us, and she's such a nice, kind, sweet person that she doesn't say it as know, abruptly or crudely as I might, but I don't believe that anybody made a mistake. I don't believe that Elaine Taylor mistakenly did anything. I don't believe that Galen Gigger mistakenly misunderstood the DNA evidence, or I don't believe any of it's a mistake. And Dr. Silkman's talking about Sherry Culhane, just like Sherry Culhane. I don't believe anything that Sherry Culhane did was a mistake or a misunderstanding or anything. I believe that they did everything they did for reasons, and those reasons were to convict the person uh, whose DNA they were testing. And in this situation, Daniel's, of course. Elaine Taylor knew that she needed to make sure somehow that that Daniel was, made to look bad or made to look dirty or nasty or guilty. She did that. She had to do that. Why? Because her son-in-law was one of the main investigators. Not only that, but she had to answer to, another problem is that we haven't really even talked about is that, the Oklahoma City Crime Lab is connected to the Oklahoma City Police Department. There's got to be a way to uh, separate the two entities so that they're not, so that the crime lab doesn't feel like they have to make sure that they, um, acquiesce to whatever it is that the police department is looking for or the investigators are looking for. And so, that's just needs to be a thing, but I don't guess it is. And as far as I know, they're still a part of the OCPD, the OC or the Oklahoma City Police Department. So somebody's gonna, whether you have the most upstanding crime lab and police department, the most honest. Somebody needs something from somebody. So there's going to be some dishonesty going on, I believe, in most labs and police departments. And yes, Dr. Silkman, absolutely. Ever since I learned about the MVAC system, I would love to be able to, for Daniel's defense, to be able to get a hold of those pants and the belt and use the MVAC, because if they can get the stuff out of a rock like they got in the West Memphis 3 with the MVAC, I'm sure they could get something, get some more valid information from Daniel's pants and belt.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you've also got to remember in Michelle Malkin's Daniel in the Den, she goes to that young forensic lass who shows her the MVAC machine, but
Yes.
she also shows her that there is a test that can be done
Yeah.
for vaginal fluid.
That's
And
it.
Elaine Taylor didn't even do that test, and it's correct me if I'm wrong. It's like under a UV light or something like that.
The alternate light source. No, she didn't do that.
She didn't do that, but that is one way to find whether it's semen or the vaginal fluid. Is that correct?
Well, I don't believe that it tells if it's vaginal fluid. I don't believe that the vaginal fluid could be, not very many labs from what I understand, and fortunately Dr. Silkman's still here and he can correct me, but I don't believe that very many labs, there's only a few, I guess, um, in the country who can test for that. But I'm trying to remember her name. Her last name is Ryan, and I can't remember her first name. But she's in Michelle Malkin's forensics video that she did. Is it Michelle Ryan? Cherie, do you remember her name? Who I'm talking about?
It seems like it was Suzanne or Susanna, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Suzanne Ryan. That's what it was. And her lab does do it. And but unfortunately, that's not, she's not, the one who's doing the testing. But from what I understand, the alternate light source is just I wish I could. It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not on my laptop, so I can't drop the link for it. So
yeah. Dr. Silkman would, if he wouldn't mind, he would have to say what the alternate light is. That like a presumptive for something? I'm horrible because I know the answer, but for whatever reason, it's escaped me. So, but even at that, Elaine Taylor didn't even do the alternate light source. She looked with, I think she said she used a flashlight and a magnifying glass, and could see that there was something there to swab, and that was all that she did. So, if we could get our hands on on oh yeah, thank you, Shaz. Well, at the time there was only one lab. I think there might be a couple of labs, but I could be wrong too, Shaz, because it happens all the time that I'm wrong. So at any rate, though, she, Elaine Taylor, she just really half-assed it. And here's my theory on that. She knew what she had to get. She knew what she had to say was there. And, so she didn't need to go to great lengths, to do any testing at all. She knew that what she needed, what they wanted, just like Joyce Gilchrist knew what the prosecutor wanted. And so, she only did the minimal to say that, yep, I tested it. So, to me, Elaine Taylor, and it's not just in Daniel's case. I mean, there's other cases that she's been involved with where, mistakes, and I just used my air quotes, have been made. So Dr. Silkman says it depends on the light source and what it detects. Using a fluorescent light or a black light usually picks up DNA. And then would be when they would send it to, if they could afford it, and if they could, have the time. I would imagine if there's only one of those labs in the country that can do that, there's probably a pretty big backlog, and it would take who knows how long to even get a result. So at any rate, and it's incredibly expensive, and so it's not something that you can just send out and get it back in a week or even a month. It's going to take a lot of time. And then Shaz says, isn't Daniel's lawyer allowed to get those trousers and get them independently tested? Yeah, Daniel has asked for the pants. I don't know if the judge is going to allow it or not. We're going to have to just wait and see. But I know that they're trying to get them independently tested. So, it comes in time. Just more hurry up and wait, which is so frustrating. But basically, Elaine Taylor, she lied. She lied in her trial testimony, and Elaine Taylor doesn't even understand well enough the information that she even has. And I believe that was kind of picked up in her deposition testimony, that she's not as equipped with all of the knowledge that she needs to even, do or testify, much like Gilchrist. And, it's how they get away with it is beyond me. Well, actually, it's not beyond me. Here's how they get away with it. As long as they're giving the state the information that the state wants and needs, and as long as the the accused doesn't end up, filing appeals and doing exactly what Daniel's doing, then they can get away with it. That's how they get away with it. Nobody's going to question them unless the accused, and usually convicted, says, "Hey, wait a minute. We want more testing, and we want this," and in appeals and post conviction and things like that. So it's we just have to wait and see what the judge says about getting the pants to get them tested independently.
Yeah, well, it'll be a completely different judge now as well, because it was Henderson that convicted him. It was Henderson who was looking at his bloody appeals. So now that former Judge Henderson is out the game, because he's got alleged sexual allegations against him by younger DAs, we can only hope and keep everything crossed that the new judge that's going to look over the case and everything like that is going to see the bloody nonsense that's in this case and either get him a retrial or get it quashed,
Yeah. Well, that's the hope. That's our hope. That's what we're hoping for. And I would imagine that a decision won't be too far down the line. So we'll have to see, because I think I mentioned last week that Daniel had been to court on motions to compel and things like that last week. And so we're just waiting on a decision from, to see what the judge has to say. And again, hurry up and wait. It's just, this whole game. And we know this from Stephen and Brendan, it's the years and years and years and years of waiting. And,
see how she was showing documents for the experts? Is that in the public, or would that need to be FOIA'd? Is there any of Daniel's documents that are publicly available, or would they all have to be FOIA'd?
No. If you Uncuff the Innocent has everything that's available to the public. Is in Uncuff the Innocent. Are you talking about the 6 forensics scientists who submitted their opinions?
Yeah, or even just any of Daniel's documents that went on between the case trial, or transcripts or anything like that. Do they all have to be FOIA'd, or are there some out there in the public? I mean, like here in the UK, the majority we have to FOIA, but there is 3 of Luke's appeal cases that are on the Scottish Government Court's website, and I've been able to download them and print them off so that I can read them, and get a rough idea of what actually took place during the trial and everything like that. And that's as close as I'm going to get to finding out bits about the trial and everything like that. So I was just wondering if there was anything like that in the public belonging to Daniel's case, or if they all are under the FOIA sort of thing.
No, there's everything that's available to the public is you can find in Uncuff the Innocent. I'm going to link it again right now. And we don't have the transcripts because they cost a lot of money, and that's
right,
kind
so
of
they're
what
FOIA'd.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like $5,000 for just for the trial transcripts. So I don't know. It's we tried to we were hoping to be able to raise some money for that, and I don't really know how much has been raised, but we had done the masks, Cherie and Kay and I, and then Team Daniel. There's the Facebook group, and Team Daniel in the Facebook group has really, done several more fundraisers. There was they tried to do some crowdsourcing, and they got shut down. Boom, really, really quick, really, really quick.
Really?
Yeah, in the beginning, super quick. Yeah, because, well, yeah, and part of, I get so frustrated because all these other wrongful conviction cases get so much um, attention, and people really pay attention to it, and they're really interested, and they really want to investigate and dig, and we don't seem to have that kind of support and awareness for Daniel's case, and it's been really frustrating to me. And somebody had told me that one of the big reasons that we have a hard time getting getting awareness for Daniel and support for Daniel is because he's a former cop who's accused of sexually assaulting and raping 13 different women. And not a lot of people, a lot of people just see former cop rapes and sexually assaults 13 women, and people shut down on that kind of thing really quick. They're less like, oh, no, not, filthy, dirty cop,
Yeah.
and so it's really, and unless somebody, unless people watch Daniel in the Den, which is how I got caught.
Yeah.
Watching Daniel in the Den at least will give people, the idea, like, well, you know what,
The
maybe
core. I'll give them the
maybe
core of the story.
maybe he's not guilty, because they make and then when people, said, you watch Daniel in the Den, and then people start looking at holtzclawtrial.com by Brian Bates, which is incredibly informative. Then people really start, sometimes they just have to watch Daniel in the Den, and they're like, oh, hell no, this guy's not
Yeah.
guilty. But certainly by the time they get through some of Bates's stuff, they're just like, no. But it's hard to get people even that far, because of the automatic bias that is that surrounds a former cop being accused of those crimes.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it would also help as well if, Michelle Malkin done Daniel in the Den, and I mean, I know she probably has been like keeping track on what's happening and things like that, but why is she not? It's been a wee while since she's done Daniel in the Den. Why does she not do like a, like a here's a review, of what's happened, and a refresher,
Right.
of what's happened in Daniel in the Den. Here, do you remember? I did Daniel in the Den. Well, this is what it was about, and just to refresh it.
Right.
Sort of thing. I think with her having the platform that she's got, I mean, what she done was brilliant, and it has opened a lot of people's eyes. But she's
Right.
kind of went quiet on it a wee bit more now, and I mean, maybe that's because the lawsuit's still happening. But she can still come on, in my opinion, anyway. She can
Right.
still come on and do like we do, do excerpts from it. Oh, you remember when I done Daniel in the Den, and this expert said this, and this expert said that.
Yeah.
And I think that would help to get the information and that out there. But as you say, it's other people's frame of mind as well. They see the cop sexual assault 13 women, and then they just have a sort of closed mind about that,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know that Michelle Malkin is a part of, the defense team. I don't know how much she participates, but I know that she got very, very active in the elections and everything last year, and she's very involved in a lot of political things. Um, am very busy, I guess. I really don't know, but it sure wouldn't hurt to try to reach out and see if she couldn't do something. Like you said, she's definitely got a bigger, stable, well-known platform. Um, Whereas, I really don't yet. So, I would like to. And here's the other thing, with Stephen and Brendan's case, for instance, or Luke Mitchell's, even for that matter. I'm not saying that their cases aren't complex, because of course they are, but we're talking about Stephen, Brendan, and Teresa Hallbach, or Luke Mitchell and I can never Jody Jones.
Yep.
We're talking about two people, three people. But when you're talking about Daniel's case, you're talking about Daniel and 13 cases.
Yeah.
And it is so difficult to try to break it all down and explain it.
Yeah.
I've gone through several different things that I'm trying to do to, to help to try to get more interest in Daniel's case by doing my shows, my lives. And it's still just really hard to try to, break down 13 different cases and one suspect.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying that as well. I mean, it's took 2 documentaries, and a couple of books, and a load of people shouting for 18 years for Luke's story to finally get some traction.
Right.
And maybe hopefully that's what it's going to take for Daniel. Maybe it's going to take what Michelle Malkin done with Daniel in the Den, and then somebody new coming in, maybe a new up and coming reporter, or college students or something like that are into true crime or something like that, and pick up Daniel's case and start reading some of the facts and everything like that, and decide, like Laura and that did with Stephen and that, this is something that we want to film. And hopefully something like that could happen, and then it will get the traction that it needs. But word of mouth is a wonderful thing as well, and I think we just need a few more people to do what you're doing, and doing the lives and getting his name out there, but like on a continuous basis and not just in bits and bobs.
Right.
And because I'm going to do Daniel on my channel as well.
Cool.
When I finally get round to doing it, I am going to speak about Daniel and here as well, because even I think the more UK supporters and that we can get on his side as well, that goes well. That gives Daniel more support, and then hopefully they'll get involved as well, and maybe join the Facebook group or come to Discord or something like that. So word of mouth is a wonderful thing, and I will be shouting about Daniel on my channel as well.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's and it's word of mouth. And like Dr. Silkman has said, yes, this is an extremely complex case because of all the victims and the allegations against Daniel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's and the more we try to do, the more I mean, I still learn things just about every day about the case that I'm just like, wait, what? Are you? How do I? How am I going to cover this? And so, and I love Shaz says, I had one guy argue with me on YouTube about this, and I told him to go check your channel and Bates. He came back and said, wow, he changed. And that's what we need. We need a lot of that too. And I really, really appreciate that, Shaz, because it really does. I mean, I wouldn't have paid any attention to Daniel's case if it hadn't been for Jack, for instance. So, but like you said, if we can get more people talking about it, and I'm always hoping that because of Stephen and Brendan, or Stephen's case, I should say, is kind of in a lull, and we're waiting for more from from the responses. I always think, okay, this is a good chance for me to get in and do some more, more information about Daniel's case. But there's always so much to still, research and learn about Stephen's case, that even though we're kind of waiting for a result to be coming, there's still a lot of, look at Sunshine Christina, she's all sorts of into, finding new information, and she's done some really great work with,
the FOIA warriors.
yeah, she is a FOIA crazy going girl, man. Like, she is just all over it, and I think it's amazing, and the information that she's found out about Gregory Allen is just fascinating. So,
No, that's it. I mean, they do say every day is a learning day, and even, you've been on Stephen's case a lot longer than what I have, but even you yourself, because of the FOIAs and things like that, the foul play and that have been getting, you're still learning new things. You're still finding out new things, whether it's about Kasurik or Pat Peterson or, or whoever, or what Fallon said in an email, or Kratz has replied, or whatever. You're still learning, and it's going to be the same with Daniel's case. The more and more that comes out about Daniel's case, and hopefully we can get round to getting transcripts and things like that when it comes to Daniel's case. And we can start getting that information out there, then it will start getting the traction that it needs and it deserves,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, okay, well, I don't know. Hopefully this intrigued a few people to go check out a few other things and learn more about, Daniel and Elaine Taylor and Joyce Gilchrist and Bob Macy, and, can get some more interest that way as well. So
go to Audible or Amazon and get Death and Justice by Mark Furnham, and that will give you an eye-opener and a fantastic insight into the Oklahoma justice system.
Yep, definitely. Yep, Dr. Silkman, we need the transcripts. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so, but, I, 2 years ago, I might have just been able to buy them, but now I'm not in a position to do that at this point. But anyway, and we'll get them eventually and be able to share them completely. And until then, I just have little excerpts here and there that I can use and try to help explain some things. So yeah, we need the transcripts, and if we could crowdsource them under some other different name, it would be even better. But I don't think that's going to happen either. So we'll have to just keep trying, keep working at it, and we'll get it eventually for sure. And I'll try to have an update for you guys next time about Dr. Silkman, awesome. Yes, I would love for you to break down that DNA. Give you an update on how the hearing went, the motion to compel hearing, and see if we can get some traction going there. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. It went a lot longer than I expected, a lot longer. So, if I had spent all the time doing everything I wanted to share, we'd still be here. So I don't want to do that to you guys, but I've given you a couple of places where you can go and find some more information. So if that's Cherie, you've been really super quiet, and I know I said everything that needed to be said already, or me, but do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I think you and Erica and Alice covered it pretty well.
There we go. All right. Well, I'm not sure yet who we're going to talk about next week. It might be Galen Giger. We'll see. He's kind of a pig too, so we'll see. But it'll be Galen Giger or I don't know, maybe Henderson or something. I don't know. But so until next week, I think we'll be just sticking with Wednesdays. I think that's my safest day to make sure we, keep this as consistent as possible. So, so until next Wednesday evening, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the comments. Dr. Silkman, thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge with us as well. And until next time, peace out.
Bye.
Bye.